It starts in the dark, your phone face down, the ceiling a blank, merciless sky. 3 a.m. again. Sleep slips out the back door and leaves you alone with the echo that wears their face. You breathe slow. You swear you've moved on. But a memory taps the glass like rain. Not the big moments, the small ones that never asked for meaning and somehow got it anyway. Morning pretends to help. You play competent, you answer emails, you drink water. Then aisle 5 ambushes you. A laugh the same cadence as theirs turns your spine into tuning wire. Suddenly the avocados look like a crime scene you can't explain. On the drive home, a song you never chose chooses you. Not even your song. Just the same decade, the same weather, the same light on a windshield you no longer share. Your hands tremble on the wheel. You pull over because there is no lane for grief that arrives without warning. Shame is quick. You tell yourself you're dramatic. You tell yourself grown people do not drown in teaspoons. But the teaspoon is an ocean disguised as a memory. You swallow salt and call it weakness. Here is the first crack in that story. What if the mind isn't cruel? What if it is precise? What if it returns to the scene not to punish you but to point? You think you are haunted by a person, but listen closer. The knock on the door has their voice. The message inside is yours. Notice the pattern. 3 settings, 3 triggers. Night. Aisle. Song. Different forms, same event. A signal insisting on being seen. You tried to run. You tried to forget. Forgetting is a fist with nowhere to land. It only hits you. So, pivot. Ask a better question. Why this face? Why this exact laugh? Why this melody that loosens the floorboards under your ribs? The answer is not yet a definition. It is a direction, away from the timeline, toward the undercurrent. Because the grocery store is not about groceries. The song is not about taste. 3 a.m. is not about insomnia. They are doorways. The mind keeps opening them until you walk through. You are not broken for remembering. You are being summoned. To what, exactly? To the place where the story stops being about them and starts being about you. Hold that thought. Keep the night. Keep the aisle. Keep the song. We're going to turn them. And when we do, the question that's been dragging you through the week will change shape. What if you are not being pulled backward at all? What if something in you is trying to pull you forward? You've been told that moving on is strength, that forgetting is proof of progress, that healing means silence inside your head. But what if that's wrong? What if remembering is the mind's way of refusing to abandon what still matters? What if the persistence itself is intelligence, not malfunction, but message? You think obsession means failure, that it's weakness in disguise. But the psyche doesn't waste energy. If a thought keeps returning, it's because something beneath it is still alive, still unfinished, still asking to be seen. Carl Jung said that nothing from the unconscious is random. Everything that rises does so for a reason. Each memory is a courier, a letter you keep sending back unopened, so it knocks again, louder. You've called it torment. You've called it punishment. But what if it's precision? What if your mind is circling not to trap you but to complete a pattern that was never finished? The person is just the surface. The name, the story, the soundtrack, all props. Beneath them sits the signal, a truth that couldn't fit anywhere else. You feel haunted, but haunting in Jungian terms is communication. Something buried is speaking through familiar faces. Something hidden is using memory as a mouth. So stop fighting the echo. Listen to its rhythm instead. Each return carries a fragment of meaning you refuse to claim the first time. Each image is trying to remind you who you were before the loss became your language. This is not about chasing the past. It's about decoding it. Because forgetting doesn't free you, it only blinds you to what still binds you. So here's the reframe. You are not weak for remembering. You are being asked to understand. The persistence of a thought is a compass, not a curse. It points inward, not backward. And if the mind keeps showing you the same face, maybe it's because you've mistaken the message for the messenger. The question isn't, why can't I let them go? It's, what in me refuses to stay gone? That's where the real story begins. We like to believe we see people clearly, but the truth is, we never see anyone as they are. We see them through ourselves, through what we want, what we fear, what we've buried. Every memory, every attraction, every wound, a mirror disguised as a face. Jung called this projection the mind's habit of hanging its own portrait on someone else's wall. Think about it. You didn't fall for them randomly. Something in you recognized something in them. Not familiarity, but reflection. A quality you longed for, or one you refused to admit you already had. At first it felt like magic. They made you feel more alive, more certain, more seen. But slowly the magic turned heavy. Because what they really awakened wasn't love. It was material, unintegrated, waiting, demanding. You keep replaying conversations, glances, mistakes. Not because they matter anymore, but because your psyche keeps pointing. There. Look there. The moment you felt small. The moment you felt powerful. The moment you recognized yourself and didn't know it. That's why they stay in your mind long after their number is gone. Not because they were unforgettable, but because you were unrecognized. By yourself. When you think about them now, notice what shape the thought takes. Is it admiration? Then you've met the version of yourself you're still afraid to become. Is it resentment? Then you're facing the power you once gave away. Is it longing? Then you're staring at potential you haven't lived yet. The psyche projects to see itself from the outside. Because sometimes, the only way to notice our own reflection is through someone else's eyes. So no, you're not obsessed with a person. You're obsessed with a possibility. One that wore their face long enough for you to finally see it. Ask yourself, what did they represent that I believed I lacked? And what happens if I stop calling it them and start calling it mine? When you can answer that, the mirror cracks, the projection withdraws, and the haunting begins to fade. Not because they've left your mind, but because you've stepped back into the image that was always yours. Some people enter your life like déjà vu. You meet them once and it feels like remembering. Their eyes, their voice, their energy, everything carries an impossible familiarity. As if you've been here before. It isn't imagination. It's architecture. Archetypal architecture. Jung said we all carry universal blueprints of experience. Archetypes, ancient patterns that shape how we love, fight, fear, and seek meaning. They're older than you, older than your parents, older than history itself. And sometimes, someone walks in who activates one. That's why certain connections feel fated, why your heart races before your mind catches up, why you can't explain the gravity of a bond that barely existed in time. You're not just meeting a person. You're meeting an energy that has lived in you for lifetimes. For a man, she might appear as the anima, the inner feminine, intuition, emotion, mystery. For a woman, he might arrive as the animus, the inner masculine, clarity, action, conviction. These aren't genders, they're orientations of being. They are the inner opposites the psyche longs to reunite. So when someone embodies what you've exiled, you feel the spark. It's electric, magnetic, terrifying. You call it chemistry, but the psyche calls it recognition. That person becomes the vessel through which your unconscious tries to restore balance. They awaken what you've forgotten how to feel. They carry the missing frequency of your wholeness. And that's why it hurts. Because they are both mirror and magnet, showing you what you're missing and pulling you toward it. The intensity is not about the story you shared, it's about the archetype they touched. They didn't choose to hold that energy, they just triggered it. They pressed the oldest button in your soul. That's why the memory feels sacred. Why forgetting feels like betrayal. Because at a level deeper than romance, they represented reunion. Not with them, but with the part of you they awakened. You think the connection was fate. Maybe it was, but not because you were meant to be together, because you were meant to remember yourself. So the question shifts again. If they carried your forgotten energy, how do you reclaim it without needing their presence? Because if the archetype is ancient, its source was never them, it was always you. When you can't stop thinking about someone, it often feels like they did something to you. Like they broke something only they can fix. But most of the time, the break came long before they arrived. The psyche is a careful archivist. Every wound you ever hid is still there, stored and sealed. And when the right person appears, or disappears, the seal breaks. They don't cause the pain. They activate it. They find the fault line that was already waiting to tremble. The disappointment, the rejection, the not enoughness. Their actions simply echo the oldest sounds in your soul. That's why the reaction feels too big for the situation. Because you're not just mourning them. You're mourning every version of you that was unseen, unheard, unchosen. The mind collapses decades into minutes. It makes every old silence speak at once. You call it obsession, but it's really inflammation. A wound that refuses to close until it's understood. And just like a physical injury, it sends pain to draw your attention. The ache isn't cruelty, it's a call. The tragedy is how we answer it. We chase the person, not the pattern. We look for closure in their apology, when what we really need is our own awareness. Because even if they came back, even if they said all the right words, the deeper wound would remain, untouched, unhealed, waiting for the next actor to play the same role. Healing begins the moment you stop asking them to be the medicine, the moment you look at the pain and whisper, "I've felt you before." It's not about blame, it's about ownership. The wound is ancient, but it's yours now. And if it keeps reopening, it's only because you've outgrown the bandage. The mind doesn't circle back to hurt you, it circles back to show you where you're still bleeding. And once you can see the blood for what it is, memory, not destiny, you can finally clean the cut instead of reopening it. Then, slowly, the haunting starts to change flavor. It stops tasting like punishment. It starts tasting like instruction. Because pain, when listened to, becomes direction. And direction followed long enough becomes freedom. There are people you can't stand. Their laugh grates. Their confidence feels like arrogance. Their freedom feels like chaos. You tell yourself you dislike them, but your body disagrees. It reacts as if they've exposed something dangerous. That's the shadow at work. Jung said the shadow is everything we've decided we're not allowed to be. Every trait we buried to stay loved, accepted, safe. It holds the anger you swallowed, the power you muted, the light you called too bright. You pushed it down so far it learned to find you through others. So the shadow walks back into your life disguised as a person, someone who dares to do what you don't, who says what you suppress, who lives with the permission you never gave yourself. You think they bother you because they're wrong, but really they bother you because they're free. They carry a piece of your forbidden self, loud, alive, unashamed, and your psyche aches to reclaim it. That's why you can't stop thinking about them, why irritation turns into fixation, why judgment hides a pulse of envy you refuse to name. You don't want them. You want what they represent. You want the parts of yourself you had to exile to survive. I once despised someone like this. Everything about them scraped against my skin, until I realized they were expressing the confidence I had disowned. They were my disobedience wearing another face. Seeing that hurt, because it meant I couldn't keep pretending I was humble when I was just afraid. Couldn't keep calling myself quiet when I was really unseen. The shadow doesn't let you hide behind virtue. It demands honesty. Integrating it doesn't mean becoming the person you dislike. It means owning the qualities you projected onto them and giving them a home inside you again. It means saying, "I have this too," without shame, without denial. The shadow is not the enemy, it's the part of you that still remembers your fullness, and until you welcome it back, it will keep sending messengers you can't forget. So next time someone gets under your skin, pause before you condemn them. Ask, what in me are they showing that I've refused to see? Because every person who disturbs your peace is secretly guarding the gate to your freedom. If every attachment begins in projection, does that mean love isn't real? That every connection is just a mirror trick of the psyche? It's tempting to think so, to reduce intimacy to illusion. But the truth is subtler and far more hopeful. Projection doesn't destroy real connection, it reveals its limits. It shows how much of what we call love is really self-recognition in disguise, and how rare, how sacred, the moment becomes when we finally see another person without the filter of our need. Jung said that genuine encounter begins only when projection ends. But projection never ends completely. It softens. It becomes transparent enough for truth to shine through. You see, we never meet anyone empty-handed. We meet them carrying every story we've ever lived. We hold them against templates built by memory and myth. They hold us against theirs. And somewhere between those two illusions, Real love tries to emerge. That's why relationships are laboratories, not fairy tales. They expose what you can't see alone. They burn away fantasy until only reality remains. Sometimes that reality is tender, sometimes it's brutal, but it's always clarifying. You don't need to erase projection to love truly. You need to recognize it, to name it when it appears, to say, "This is my story speaking through your face right now." That awareness turns illusion into dialogue. When you do that, something miraculous happens. You begin to love both ways at once. You see them for who they are, and you see yourself through what they awaken. Love becomes less about possession and more about perception, less about keeping, more about witnessing. And the same mind that once used obsession to survive now uses understanding to stay awake. So don't fear the projection. Let it guide you to clearer sight. Because the moment you stop demanding that someone complete you, you start seeing them and yourself in it completely. The paradox is this: real love is born from illusion, but it survives only through awareness. And every person you couldn't forget was never proof that love was fake, only proof that the psyche was trying to teach you what love actually is. Everything until now has been preparation. The projections, the wounds, the shadow. Each one points toward the same destination: individuation, Jung's word for becoming whole. It's not enlightenment, it's integration, not perfection, but honesty. A long conversation between the parts of you that have never met. You begin by noticing the thoughts that repeat, the feelings that flare, the faces that reappear in dreams. Each is a map, each is a message, each is an unfinished piece of you asking to come home. Then you name them. You say, "Yes, that's my anger. Yes, that's my need for control. Yes, that's my longing to be seen." Naming is not judgment, it's ownership. Then comes the hardest part: staying. Sitting with what you find instead of fixing it. Letting discomfort tell its story before you silence it. Because what you avoid doesn't disappear, it burrows deeper. Individuation is slow. It asks for patience where ego wants progress. It asks you to stop editing yourself into smaller versions just to feel safe. It asks you to stand in your contradictions until they stop fighting. You don't become whole by adding things. You become whole by remembering what you forgot, by reclaiming the traits you projected, the wounds you inherited, the shadows you exiled. You gather them like lost children and bring them home. And every person who lingers in your mind has carried one of those children to your door. That's why you can't let them go until you open it. So when you find yourself spiraling into old memories, don't ask, "Why am I still thinking about them?" Ask, "What part of me is knocking right now?" Because once you answer that, the obsession begins to dissolve. Understanding replaces urgency. Curiosity replaces shame. And the mind, finally satisfied that you've heard the message, starts to grow quiet. You can't rush individuation. You can only participate in it. Every day, a small act of awareness. Every night, a fragment of shadow reclaimed. Every haunting, an invitation to return to yourself. This is the work only you can do. And the reward isn't forgetting, it's freedom. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when the weight begins to lift. The memory still visits, but it no longer owns the room. It knocks softly instead of breaking in. You don't know exactly when it changed. Maybe it was after the 1,000th question finally lost its urgency. Maybe it was the first time you thought of them and felt gratitude instead of ache. That's how integration begins, not as fireworks but as stillness. You stop analyzing their every word. You stop asking what they're doing now. You start noticing yourself again, your own breath, your own life expanding in the space they once filled. This is extraction, not erasing the memory, but reclaiming your energy from it. You retrieve the power you lent to the image. You withdraw the projection like a tide returning to its source, and what's left is just a human story, one that shaped you, but no longer defines you. At first, it feels strange to live without the constant noise. Silence after obsession can feel like loss, but soon you recognize it as peace, not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of understanding. The person becomes ordinary again, a character in a chapter you've already read. They keep their place in the archive of your becoming. You keep the lesson, and that lesson is simple, though it took everything to learn it. You were never trying to hold on to them. You were trying to hold on to yourself. The qualities you loved in them, you've developed them. The wounds they exposed, you've begun to heal them. The shadows they carried, you've welcomed home. Now when the thought arises, it arrives like an old song you once knew by heart. You remember the melody, but it no longer rules the rhythm of your days. This is what it means to move on in truth, not to forget but to integrate, not to erase but to evolve, because real closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your understanding. And the moment that understanding lands, the haunting finally fulfills its purpose and releases you. 3 a.m. again. But this time, the silence feels different. No battle, no loop, just the hum of your own breathing, steady, awake, alive. You still remember the laugh in the grocery aisle, the song on the radio, but they no longer open old wounds, they open understanding. Now you see what you couldn't then. They lingered because something in you was waiting to be found. Every sleepless night was an initiation. Every memory was a message. Every ache was a teacher disguised as loss. You spent months thinking it was about love or heartbreak or unfinished business, but it was always about awakening. The mind repeats what the soul refuses to ignore. And the soul refuses to ignore what still needs to come home. The people we can't forget are mirrors placed with surgical precision. They show us the cracks where the light wants to enter. They stay until we see. And the moment we do, they fade, not into nothing, but into meaning. Now you understand. They weren't the story. They were the signal. They weren't the destination. They were the door. And you walked through it. The haunting has done its job. The psyche has delivered its lesson. You are no longer chasing ghosts. You are gathering yourself. Wholeness begins exactly here in the remembering that frees you. So next time someone lingers in your mind, don't ask how to forget them. Ask what they came to show you. Because once you learn that, they'll stop haunting you and start guiding you. If this reflection found you in the dark, stay with us. There are more doors to open, more mirrors to turn into light. Subscribe and keep walking the path of remembering who you are.